Hi everyone, it's Rachel. You're listening to the Misfortune Cookies podcast. In today's episode, I will be interviewing my husband, Karl, to hear his take on our infertility and recurrent pregnancy loss. Obviously, this is something we've been going through together, but I wanted to interview him specifically because I think it's pretty rare for a guy to talk about infertility and pregnancy loss, much less an Asian guy. We hope you enjoy this conversation. Hey, Karl.
Hi, Rachel.
How's it going?
It's going all right. It's been quite a week.
What's this week?
It's the week of the election, 2020.
Yeah, it's been a nail biter.
Yeah, today's Thursday, November 5th, so we're still waiting on the rest of the results to come in.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also been an eventful week for us.
It has.
Personally.
Yep.
Do you want to share a little bit why?
Yeah, so on election day, actually, I started bleeding and cramping, which is because I was miscarrying our third pregnancy, and I miscarried the previous two. So that was a lovely Tuesday, wasn't it?
And sort of how I've experienced it.
Yeah.
Because I think it's pretty rare for men in general to talk about pregnancy loss, and then much less an Asian dude's perspective.
Well, maybe we can start with just what the diagnosis means. We have both diagnoses of infertility as well as something called recurrent pregnancy loss. So, yeah, do you want me to share a little about more what they mean?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Maybe for some of our listeners who have never heard of infertility, or at least don't really understand what the differences are between infertility and pregnancy loss, maybe you could share and unpack what those are.
Yeah, sure. So infertility is diagnosed when a couple has been trying for a year, 12 months, to become pregnant and has not succeeded in carrying a pregnancy to term. Whereas recurrent pregnancy loss is when a woman has had a loss, either an early loss or a later loss, at least 2 or sometimes at least 3 times. The definition changes between providers. Yeah. So we meet both those criteria. We've been trying for about a little less than 2 years, and we have had 3 losses and gone for a full year without successfully getting pregnant.
Yeah, it's been quite the ride.
Yeah. Maybe we can start with how it was for you to receive the news.
Yeah, I mean, right out the gate, I would say that these words suck. Like infertility, miscarriage. I like pregnancy loss a little bit better because it's more specific, but especially like terms like miscarriage, it makes you feel as a couple that it's your fault, that you did something wrong. And in almost all cases, it's never because you did something wrong as a couple. It's really something that, life and death, it's really something that's out of your control. Yeah, that's sort of the first reaction I have to those terms. I believe when we had our first miscarriage, which was at around 10, 11 weeks, of twins, the physician that was on call, I guess he was a fellow, told us that we had a spontaneous abortion.
Yes.
So those were the terms that they used and told us what had happened. And yeah, there wasn't any sort of like, okay, here's a support group that meets on Tuesdays or whatever. We had to like dig through the internet and Google and find all those things by ourselves. But yeah, I'm so glad that you shared sort of the diagnoses criteria for infertility and sort of defined what recurrent pregnancy loss looks like, because I think for me, I wrestled a lot with denial of having infertility and having recurrent pregnancy loss. I think most people who know me well know that I'm pretty optimistic and that I am a go-getter and maybe a bit ambitious, you could even say. And so when we received this diagnosis of infertility, I really denied it and really struggled to accept it until I really looked at the criteria for it and how encompassing or how we fit the bill. At least for couples that are younger than 35, that it simply only takes a year of trying to conceive and failing and for that to qualify us, and we fit that bill. So I guess that was the first impact to me.
And maybe I can just add here that approximately 85 to 90% of couples will successfully conceive within their first year of trying.
Right.
So that's just an idea of the prevalence of infertility.
And how rare infertility is.
Well, I was going to say how common.
Oh, okay.
10 to 15% is a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
When you do the math. Yeah. I don't know. I think it's been hard for several reasons. I think the first one is like, it's just been hard to reach out because I think as a guy, I don't really want to burden my other guy friends. I think it's hard to find other men who are also going through the same thing. You can make a Facebook post, but people will just scroll and go about their day.
Yeah.
I think the other reasons why it was extremely hard too is that a lot of it was derivative. Like, you're experiencing something in your body, but I feel powerless because it's your body and I'm finding out secondhand.
Yeah.
And after the fact, oftentimes, if you're cramping or feeling pain or, something else is going on in your body. And honestly, the stress of finances too definitely has hit me because right now I'm sort of our primary breadwinner and it costs a lot of money to do ultrasounds. And thank God we have health insurance through my employer, but, it's always, nail biting, I think, is another phrase I would bring up again, because you never know like how much something is going to cost unless you are able to hunt down the CPT codes and call your insurance, which I'm really grateful for you for doing so much of that heavy lifting.
And even then, you can't quote them on their rates.
Yeah, it's never guaranteed how much it's going to cost.
Yeah, I was just thinking today actually that our first miscarriage, for which we had 3 ultrasounds, cost us over $2,000, and for nothing, no baby.
Right.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, and since then I've switched health insurance a few times because switched jobs a few times. But anyway, definitely stress of finances was one, and I would say like the last point is just the amount of health related information to keep abreast of, and the decision making of absorbing all the information that you read online or whatever your provider is trying to tell you is exhausting and overwhelming.
It is.
And I'm so grateful that you have this encyclopedic mind that's able to just remember almost every shred of detail. But for me, it's I struggle to keep afloat or to keep up. I would say that's like the third main point of experience or impact to me throughout this journey.
Yeah, I hear at least 2 themes in there. One being isolation, both from your social circle and in a way from me even, because there's this space between us and this gap between what I'm experiencing and what I'm telling you, what you're hearing, and even what you can do about it. So isolation, and then being overwhelmed by the magnitude of and the depth of information.
Yep. And the powerlessness, because being like secondhand, everything is derivative too. I don't know. I feel like I've learned a lot through this experience. I've learned a lot about myself too, about how I respond to grief and to terrible, terrible tragedy and misfortune.
Hey.
As a nod to our podcast title.
Yes.
But one thing I've learned a lot, or relearned again, I suppose, is how pain avoidant I am, how easy it is for me to throw myself into work. I remember when we had our first miscarriage, I took off a week off of work, and I told my bosses and stuff that we had just experienced a miscarriage, But
You took 2 weeks, baby.
I took 2 weeks off, that's right. But the first week of taking off, I applied to another job.
Yeah.
I took that time off instead of grieving, instead of like really sitting with you. I like build a prototype in a PowerPoint deck or Google Slides deck or whatever.
Yeah.
In order to apply for a new job. That's what I did with my time. And I look back on that and I really regret that. Well, I got the job, so I don't regret that, but it's just I didn't really take the proper measures, proper steps to slow down, really sit with my grief and really look at it, really be with it, and then really be with you too and process just what the heck happened to us. I think a lot of what I wanted to do was run away and bury myself in some other, distract myself in some other endeavor. In that case, it was to apply for a job. And it's not to say that that wasn't like a good use of time either. Like I was in a place where I needed to switch jobs, or I really wanted to switch jobs because my job back then wasn't doing it for us. And so, but yeah, I don't know. I've learned a lot more about being able to feel what I'm unwilling to feel, I guess. That's been the question that I heard recently from another podcast is, what is it that you're unwilling to feel? And then how much courage do you have to just sit with that and to feel exactly that?
Yeah, so going back to, this was January of 2019, right? You had your 26th birthday, and we had our miscarriage 2 days after that. So going back to that Karl, that 26-year-old Karl, what do you think he needed to have permission to feel his grief and not distract? What would you want to offer to that version of you?
I don't know if there's anything that I could have offered that person, except I do remember very distinctly though, like emailing a few very close friends, and a close friend of mine sort of responding in genuine, like in an authentic way, replying back to my email, saying that he would also go and cry somewhere. And that actually gave me permission to later, I think that night, have a strong like cry. So it wasn't until like other people in my life responded in a natural and healthy way that I finally like was able to let myself go and be sad and to cry and to process, start processing my grief, or at least start accepting it. So I think for anyone else who's going through this, you know, I would want them to know that it's terrible and it should never happen. It should never happen. It should never have happened in the first place. And that it's totally something that's worth grieving and something that's worth taking your time to fully process and fully experience as a human being. Because I think that's what else, that's the other thing that I've learned through this experience, is that life is shitty and people go through really shitty experiences all the time. And I think this experience, or that first miscarriage for me at least, was the first, I would say, like big nuclear bomb in my otherwise like upwardly mobile life and upwardly linear life, from going through high school, going to college, getting a job, getting married. All of that stuff, I think, felt relatively clear of blockers, I guess. And this was the first major big nuclear bomb in my life.
Yeah.
And I think I've been spending a lot of time also trying to explain to some of my friends what this experience has been like and how it's impacted my mental health. And so some of the analogies that I've used include like death in the family, if you've had a parent die, or a close aunt or uncle pass, or a sibling or something like that. I think people can understand a little bit better. Or if you, I guess another way I've related to it is like feeling very stuck in your career too. It's definitely not in the same, I guess, ballpark, but I guess if you feel like your work is, on some level like your identity, part of your identity, and you feel like you can't actually reach that vocation or that part of your desired or your imagined career, I think that can be similar-ish to a desire or dream to become a parent or to have a kid. So those are some things that I often share with my friends who are trying to empathize with me.
So you talked a lot about the first miscarriage. That was in January of 2019. And it's been almost 2 years since then. How has your experience of infertility and pregnancy loss evolved from then?
I think I've started to really accept where we are now and started to look at everything through a lens of like gratitude as well. Like I'm really grateful that we have the means to access treatment options and that we live in an age where there's an abundance of information, both good and bad. YouTube videos explaining pregnancy loss and how to get pregnant and all that stuff. So
How to get pregnant.
well, how to get pregnant after recurrent pregnancy loss. And yeah, I'm grateful for our current provider as well and the team, I guess, that we have assembled. And I'm grateful that it's really shaped the tenor of our marriage too, and that even though it's put it through hell, that we've been able to grow and support each other, or at least get better at supporting each other. I guess one thing I always like to remind myself is that we have been through all of it, like all of our basic vows in the last 3+ years of our marriage, that we've been through richer and poorer, better and worse, in sickness and in health. So that's something that I think about and draw strength from when we said those words to each other.
You talked about this question that I'm going to throw back at you, which is, what are you unwilling to feel? Or what have you been unwilling to feel?
I think the other day we were doing like this emotions pie exercise, and you had a great list of emotions that I think your therapist gave you. And one of the emotions on there that I didn't realize was an emotion or a word that could be used to express my emotions, that I thought was really apt for me, was trapped. So much of this journey, I guess, has felt like there are only so many options in terms of treatment that someone can pursue, and they're limited because you have finite resources, whether it's money or emotional strength. There's a lot in either any treatment option that requires either a lot of money, and I don't want to get into all of the details here, but yeah, the treatment options either take up a lot of money or a lot of your patience and your ability to wait and ability to handle uncertainty. And so I would say like the primary emotion that I have been unwilling to feel is a sense of feeling trapped. And I think it's probably exacerbated because of COVID and being in a pandemic. And I'm sure a lot of people, all around the world maybe have experienced this emotion of feeling trapped, of feeling so stuck, of feeling so depressed. So without creative juices or energy, I guess, to apply yourself towards anything else. But that would be the primary emotion of feeling trapped. And I wouldn't recommend, like, just because, sometimes I'm unwilling to feel that, I wouldn't recommend to anyone else to, okay, you really need to sit with that feeling of just feeling trapped and just stay there. Not at all, I guess. I think it's important to recognize. And for me, it's been important to recognize that feeling and to understand why it's there, because it usually points to something else. Like, okay, maybe I feel so trapped because I feel so hopeless about our treatment options, or about our potential outcomes, or about something else, whatever it is. So it's really important, or at least for me, I've realized it's really important to sit with that first emotion and see what else is underneath it, and then try to work from there and constantly try new things to adapt to it. One thing we've been doing a lot recently is watch The Great British Bake Off and
play Zelda.
That's right, which is your first video game officially, which I thought was, I never thought that we'd be able to play video games together, but I'm so grateful for that. And like random other things like box mix chocolate cake from Betty Crocker and being able to bake that stuff together. Just little things like that. I guess I never imagined us exploring as a couple and going and just trying new things together. Yeah, and I would say also like being able to still be intimate with each other throughout this process has also been helpful and encouraging too. Like whether it's hugs or cuddling. Yeah, I'm just grateful that we are still able to be intimate with each other throughout this process and find all these different ways to try to grow our marriage through this pain and through this trial, I guess.
Yeah, you said a lot of stuff there that I kind of want to dwell on a bit. So you talked about feeling stuck, feeling trapped. And yeah, it makes sense that a way for you to fight that is to just move, is to just try things, try new things, get out of the box. Yeah, I agree with that. And then you also said something really interesting, which is about first feeling whatever emotion it is you're feeling, and then tracing it all the way down, so to speak, to see what's underneath it, not just festering in that one emotion. That sounds like a really nuanced and sophisticated process. I'm very impressed.
I mean,
you just sit there and like trace your emotions in your head.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to say that happens more often than not, but most of the times it doesn't. Or I'm still getting better at it. I think for me, being able to do more of that tracing and being able to like talk about my emotions in this way is really healing and important to do, because it's not easy, and doing it like more often, I think, is the key. It is practice. Yeah. And making those connections, because emotions, or at least what I've learned, is that emotions are information, and they tell you stuff about yourself and what's happening to you and or what you are doing in the world. And it requires a certain level of like willingness to practice that awareness, I guess, or to be mindful of all the things that are going on. So yeah, it is a muscle, I guess, that I'm learning to exercise more of.
And then one thing you said earlier is that having that one friend hold a mirror up to you helped you to identify, or maybe even gave you permission to feel grief. So that could be one ingredient for what it takes to sit with your emotions and to process them. What do you think, what are some other ingredients for you?
I don't know. That one definitely is important. I think there's a difference in sort of like seeing my wife go through emotions.
I could just be crying for hours and it wouldn't help you to grieve, would it?
Well, I don't know. It definitely would move me, but it's just different in the way that I don't know. I'm not sure why it's so different.
I can offer my thought,
Okay.
which is that I'm the biggest thing that you can't control. And me grieving probably doesn't help you feel in your feeling of paralysis, because you can't stop me. You can't help me. So I guess just because of the nature of our relationship, I'm less of a invitational, like, emotional catalyzer for you. I kind of more shut you down. Does that make sense?
Yes, a little bit.
Okay.
Like, I think the importance of being able to develop friendship outside of marriage too is that
Yes.
sometimes it's not safe to, nuclear bomb your spouse all day with really heavy emotions. And, they get tired. I mean, I would say that's
Are
true
you
for your
telling
friends
me,
too.
is that feedback for me?
No, not specific feedback.
Oh, okay. What other spouse do you have?
I guess what I'm saying is, like, it takes a village.
No, I agree with you 100%. I'm just
or
trolling a little.
Yeah. And when that one friend, like, I mean, it was in an email, but I could feel the emotions on the other side of the internet.
Through the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was a really crucial ingredient. I think, probably sociologists study this, and psychologists probably study this on, like, a societal level, like the dominant emotions of, various countries. The geopolitics of emotions, I think, was a book cover that I picked up once, but didn't read it.
Yep.
So I definitely think the first ingredient is, like, having people that surround me that are also willing to express emotions and that have that, like, emotional intelligence or experience or skill, because it is a skill. I think it really is a skill set. Like, we talk about, emotional leadership, or emotionally intelligent leadership all the time in the business world now.
Do we?
Well, at least in the workplace, I think people may think about that a lot. I don't know how well it's really executed. Anyway, that's a different topic.
Another podcast.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know if there would be any other ingredient, because, like, at the end of the day, emotions are, something that humans, I guess you could argue that animals experience emotions too, but I think it really takes, like, a community, like, other people in your life who are safe spaces and that represent places that you can, or people that you can go to express your heaviest emotions and your lightest emotions too. Like, I think for mental health, for mental wellness, you need both, or you need someone that can carry both. Yeah, ideally. Or you need more than one person, ideally. And I think we're learning a lot of that right now in the pandemic too. Like, who are really my friends? Who really is, like, looking out for me and calling me up and texting me like, yo, where you been? Where you at? How you doing? So I think I found some of those people, and I'm grateful for that.
How do you hope that the conversation with your friends will continue to move forward?
I hope that they see me also as, like, someone that they can go to down the road if they ever encounter,
Any of this nonsense?
Yeah, well, I pray that no one else in my circle has to experience this, God forbid, but if any sort of other nuclear bomb hits them from, like, a life transitions perspective, or, anything, I just hope that people feel like, okay, yeah, Karl, I think, gets this, or he can understand on some level, and I can talk to him about stuff. That would be awesome. And I hope that they can see it as, like, a open dialogue or open exchange of that it's not just one-sided, that it's mutual. If I share something heavy, they don't have to feel obligated to share something heavy either, but that they can share something really light, and that we can sort of mutually share in all the thoughts and feels of life. So, yeah, that would be my one hope going forward with my friends.
You also talked a little bit about some more day-to-day coping skills, self-care, like video games and baking. What has that been like for you? Still having a day-to-day rhythm in the midst of appointments and bad news and flailing wife, you know?
Yeah, I mean, something I've been thinking about a lot is like smart defaults. Like, how can I create smarter, like easier things for myself to pick up without thinking too much about it? And so definitely still in the contemplation phase, less in like actually having really smart defaults, but I'm noticing like recurring patterns that I fall back on when I'm like super stressed or maybe depressed or anxious or scared of the future. So that would include things like making signature dishes that I'm relatively comfortable making without having to follow a recipe, like 鸡蛋西红柿 or 麻婆豆腐, and or I don't know, like, yeah, I'm gonna look forward to like baking chocolate cake again out of a box because I know how to do that now. Or even like really little things like making our bed, which just involves folding our two blankets and not really straightening out the mattress cover. But just like very, very repetitive, perhaps. Like doing laundry is something that I'm happy to do. Or like vacuuming. Vacuuming our floor or room is also something that I find some solace in to help pass the time. So
Smart defaults.
smart defaults, exactly. And I'm hoping like even recording more podcast episodes like this becomes like a smart default kind of thing.
Yeah. Having a bad day? Just record a podcast.
I don't know if it works like that, but we'll see.
Now, I was going to say that makes a ton of sense because when you're stressed and you're stripped of your resources, that's especially when you're not going to have the energy or the wherewithal to generate, you know, new ideas for how to self-soothe or regulate your emotions or bring down your anxiety.
Yes, and I would also say though, like to leave some room for the opportunity to run into new small smart default experiences. Like for me it was the box mix chocolate cake Betty Crocker from Acme. Like
you were
learning how
open to
make.
that new experience.
Exactly, yeah. Plus I don't know if we like baked very much chocolate cake growing up in my Asian Chinese American household. So
Which leads me to my next question, which is I'm curious whether and how your Asian American identity has played into this experience for you of going through infertility, pregnancy loss, etc.
yeah, I think it's complicated and it's definitely related. I only have like maybe one or two thoughts in terms of how it's related. First would be
Sorry.
what?
The way you said it was so cute.
What?
I only have one or two thoughts.
What? I only have, yeah. So the first one is like, I just remember distinctly like all the Asian aunties and uncles kind of figures that we had at our wedding who would like approach us and like congratulate us, you know, when everyone was like going around the tables. And I remember them distinctly saying like, oh, 早生孩子, or like basically like, you know, we look forward to you to getting pregnant soon. And that was, I don't know, I think that was subconsciously embedded, but in some way I feel like that created unnecessary expectation, or I don't know, maybe this will bleed into a larger conversation, but like I think there's this expectation of high achieving or high achievement, at least in amongst East Asians.
Yeah.
So like for Chinese Americans or Taiwanese Americans or Korean or maybe Japanese Americans too, there's this expectation that you will jump through all the hoops and tick off all the boxes and be a straight arrow. And upwardly mobile, and your life will follow more or less like 3 or 4 different linear career paths, which comes with just the complex story of being maybe part of an immigrant family. And so I don't think it's necessarily unique maybe to Asian Americans. I'm sure there are other sorts of immigrants that have this kind of expectation, but for me, that's like the first thought that I had about how like my Asian American identity connects with or intersects with like our experience of infertility and recurrent pregnancy loss. And the second one I would say also is like connected is like just the intense shame and face culture that I think Asian Americans experience. And again, it's not probably exclusive to just Asian Americans, but for me, I think I feel a lot of shame or lose a lot of face in trying to talk about this stuff with maybe like my parents, or maybe even with like other friends who already have kids. And it's hard to not feel like, I don't know, and I know it's not this case, but it's hard to not feel like it's a competition, or like fall into a false paradigm of scarcity complex, like, okay, they have a baby, so when are we gonna get one?
They took our baby.
Yeah, that's the like sort of the worst case natural progression of that kind of thinking. And I'm not saying it's right at all, it's just it's part of being, I don't know, like having this performative drive and maybe this constant like checking over your shoulder and shame and face kind of culture. And it's deeply embedded. Like I don't want to admit it's there, but it's definitely there a little bit. So yeah, that would be like the second thing.
Yeah. Anything else you want to share?
No, I'm just tired. I'm tired of not having a baby.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's like at the center of everything that we do now and not do.
This non-existence of a baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we can't go a day without really thinking about it. And what I want to do is like continue to reframe this experience to connect it to like everything else that's going on in the world. And it does help to know like a lot of things are going wrong in the world right now too. I don't know, that's really mean to say maybe, but I think it would suck if everything in the world was like going really well and we were like going through infertility and pregnancy loss. Yeah, I don't know if that makes any sense.
It's not like everyone else is sunshine and rainbows and we alone are suffering.
Right.
Yeah.
Like it does feel like a spiritual malady of sorts. Like it's more than just, you know, us as a couple not being able to get pregnant. It feels like this, like we're all groaning.
Yeah.
And we all are going through some sort of suffering or some sort of pain right now. So in a way, I think that's helpful to know, like we're all just doing our best and hoping for a little bit better. And I don't know, that's where I'm at right now, is trying to do it one day at a time, one moment at a time.
Accepting hardship as the pathway to peace.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if what you meant was that your suffering is giving you more empathy or space to connect with other people who are suffering because you're participating in this kind of global suffering.
Yes, for sure. And I think it makes me more sensitive to what potential suffering other people are going through, which is not always the best because I can be over reading suffering into someone else's
Suffering
life.
radar.
Yeah. That doesn't
Super
exist
high.
maybe in someone else's life.
Yeah.
So I want to be sensitive to that too. But it does bring me a little comfort to know, like, hey, a lot of people are suffering right now, and this is a universal experience, and it makes me feel less lonely overall. So
Yeah. And just to take this all the way, I guess you're kind of alluding to meaning in your suffering, finding meaning in the fact that we're going through what we're going through.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is there a way you would articulate that meaning?
Maybe two things, like suffering is like meaningless in and of itself. Like, you can't explain away all suffering. You know, sometimes there's no clear direct cause and effect, and I think that's where it can get really painful, is if someone tries to explain your suffering.
Oof.
And tries to be an authority over your, you know, your case of whatever, insert whatever it is. It can be infertility, it can be recurrent pregnancy loss. You know, some of the most unhelpful things I think that people have said is like, oh, you'll all get there, like, you know, just give it a few more tries. Or, oh, like, we were also struggling with infertility, but after 4 years it was good. Like, those comments, they're all really well meaning, but they don't really help that much. And I think the reason why that is because there's over identification.
Yes.
Like, someone tries to, you know, oh yeah, well, my so and so, you know, my cousin-in-law or whatever, they like struggle too. And then, you know, they did IVF. So, like, have you guys thought of IVF?
Have you thought of adoption? So many kids need your help.
I know. What haven't we thought of, you know? It's like,
I would just say, you got $40,000? Please, here's my bank account.
I know, you can wire it here. Here's my routing number.
Oh, no, okay. Not to be, I think that was too mean.
Okay.
I agree with you. All these comments are really well-meaning, and I don't want to put people in a position where they feel petrified and not wanting to say anything.
Mm-hmm. But I guess, like, what I would say is there's a way to, I think, share or, like, communicate your experience with someone else if they ask for it, that isn't triggering or unhelpful or discouraging even. And I think that just requires, like, just checking in with that person first and saying, like, hey, you know, is it okay with you if I share my experience?
Yeah.
And then the other person saying, yes, go ahead, please. And then, like, just that little simple act, I think, can change how you come across in the sharing of your story, whatever it is. So I think that's my first takeaway from this experience. Like, yeah, suffering, it doesn't have to have, like, a cause. It doesn't have to have an explanation, and it doesn't have to, you know, all point to one thing, like, oh, we're all sinners, the end. Like, it doesn't have to have a blanket explanation. And then number two, I think what I'm still learning and experiencing and living every day is that the meaning that I take away from my suffering is going to change, and it changes every day. And I think this is, I would say, I would be willing to generalize this and say that most people experience suffering differently, and they're going to be taking different things away from their suffering, which is to say they're going to be extracting different kind of meanings and purposes from their suffering. And sometimes that means they don't extract any meaning or any purpose from their suffering. And I think that's been a point of, like, something I've had to let go of too, like, from this process, is to let you process suffering differently than me, and to not, like, control, you know, the outcome of how you process, like, how you process our recurrent pregnancy loss, and when you are ready to move forward or sort of derive further value or purpose or next steps from what we have been going through. So it would be those two things.
So the expectation that we should both draw the same meaning from the same experiences is really unhelpful, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
And that not all suffering needs to be explained.
Right. I feel like any explanation would be just rather trite, invalidating almost.
Or result in over-identifying.
Yeah. Yeah,
over-explaining.
I like when you said those things about someone trying to explain your suffering to you when in fact they are far from being an authority on your suffering. But they think they are because they have this one loosely related reference point in their mind, which makes them an authority on your situation.
And I guess I would just like add to that, I guess like what I expect then from like hopefully I can expect this from my friends is like that they do more listening and question asking and less like over relating or like, oh, well, you know, this will all get better, right? Like because of this, right? Like, or haven't you thought of this? Or like, what if you just did this? Like, I hope that, you know, I can expect them to do less of that maybe and more of just asking questions, being curious, checking in on me, asking me how I'm feeling, and hopefully helping me practice more of that permission, like permission to feel, permission to giving me like encouraging me to do that more and less of like trying to solve my problem. Yeah, that's what I want to say. Like, I feel like as I already do that a lot for myself. I try to solve my problems and I try to solve other people's problems, and I do that all day at work, and I try to solve my wife's problems. And so I think what I need at least less of is someone trying to solve my problem and someone just there being present, curious, willing to encourage me to experience what I need to experience or feel what I'm unwilling to feel. So, yeah.
Except if you're our doctor.
Right, except if you're a reproductive endocrinologist.
Then please solve our problems.
Then, yes, then we want to talk to you, especially if you are Asian. Just kidding.
Yeah. I think just to say one more thing, there's a reason, though, why it's so much easier to reach for problem solving than it is to sit with the emotion or with the unknown, or because when somebody asks you how are you feeling, they don't know what you're going to say back. You could say, oh, I want to kill myself, and then what do they do, you know? Whereas if they're just offering information, they're just offering information. Yeah.
It's much harder to be in a relationship with someone who is depressed and wants to kill themselves versus someone who's just like, oh yeah, I had Trader Joe's for dinner.
Right.
It's harder to know what to do with that kind of information.
Yeah. And the point is maybe you can't do anything.
Right.
And that makes them feel helpless, which, as we've discussed, isn't a very empowering feeling.
It's not.
Because we have been taught that our identity and our competence comes from being able to fix things, solve things, do things, exert control. Especially, I think, someone who is male identifying. You can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that's especially
I think you're right.
pressurizing. Yeah. Cool. Any last words, Karl, before we wrap up this very intense podcast session?
No, I don't think this will be the last time we talk about our recurrent pregnancy
Infertility.
loss. Yeah, and our miscarriages. I'm hoping that we can find a few more people from our network to maybe even share their stories. But yeah, I think this is a good place to stop for now.
Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks, everyone. Hey, Thanks for listening to the Misfortune Cookies podcast. If you're enjoying the podcast, please share it with your friends, subscribe, or give us a follow. Also, we'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions, comments, or you would like to share your story with us, send us an email at misfortunecookiespodcast@gmail.com. Bye!